Good afternoon and welcome back to Politico's Europe Tech Summit. I am Mathieu Paulet, a technology reporter, and I'm very thrilled to host the next panel about the Europe digital infrastructure. And as chance would have it, and you've probably heard of it before, there is this ongoing consultation on the topic, on the future of connectivity, which is trying to identify the spanners in the work and to identify what it will take for European citizens and businesses to make the most of the promises and opportunities that technology brings. So there is this multi-million investment gap for the bloc to meet its digital targets, and among the several issues that this exploratory consultation addresses, there is this idea of splitting the bill with the big online platforms. The idea is not so new, but once again is not so much embraced by a large part of the tech industry and civil society, and we will get to that. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will start the panel in a minute, but before that, a quick reminder, although I think you're familiar already with swap card platforms, so I won't repeat like the housekeeping remarks you've been hearing all day, but feel free to interact, to ask questions on the platform. But let me welcome the panelists. So please, if you'd like to join me on stage. Yes, don't be shy, go ahead. Hi. Please, have a seat. So to my left, I will start with you. We've got like Lisa Bellulo. Hi. So you're the General Secretary of Bouygues Telecom, which is one of the French telecom operators. On your left, there is Thomas Lohninger. Oh, I forgot already. Lohninger. So Executive Director of the Austrian NGO Epicenter Works. I didn't forget your name, just to be fair, but how to pronounce it, just so people know. It's not. I knew who he is. Then we have Camilla Klock. So the Acting Director for Connectivity at DJ Connect from the European Commission. Thank you so much for being here. And last but not least, Guido Lobrano, so Senior Vice President and Director General for Europe at the Information Technology Industry Council, which is a DC-based trade association representing global companies. So yeah, let's dive right into it. And I'd like to start with you, actually, Lisa. So as I said earlier, there is like this big investment cap, and operators said that they are trailing behind the global peers when it comes to coverage, to take up, and most importantly, maybe to revenues, and we will get to that. What are the challenges that you are facing today as an operator?
Okay. Actually, yes, there were many talks about an investment gap, and I think a figure was given last week at the FTTH Council, a figure as big as 170 billion euros by 2030. We are a challenger. We invest a lot. More in general, telecom operators invest more than 50% of their EBITDA. Why is that? We want to provide more connectivity to our clients. The issue is that we do not master the data growth and the data flows, which are much supply-driven and which are not in the power of the consumers to manage, and we cannot manage them too. So we're happy to offer more connectivity to users, but we feel there is a lot of optimization to do in terms of data growth. So we would have a better deal if we shared that responsibility between content providers and between telecom operators, because 80% of our incremental costs at Bouygues Telecom are sensitive to data growth. And data growth in itself does not provide additional quality to our clients. So this is an issue I hope we will delve into during this panel.
We will certainly, but maybe let's hear it from Guido, because you've heard Lisa. Do you see things in the same light?
Yeah, I think we have different data. I would say, we represent tech companies from all the different segments of the industry, of the sector. And certainly, we see that it's very important to invest in infrastructure in Europe. The goals are fully shared by the tech industry as well. At the same time, we do not see this direct correlation between a potential increase in costs and the increase in data traffic. Actually, what we notice is that a lot of the costs in infrastructure development is driven by the last mile, is driven by increasing rollout. But a lot of research shows that the cost increase linked to data traffic is pretty much zero. So there is not really a direct correlation for us between the traffic and the cost of the networks.
So actually that leads us to the exploratory consultation that the European Commission launched 2 months ago. But maybe, Camilla, can you please walk us through what is this exploratory consultation? Because I understand I haven't been in Brussels for a very long time, but I understand, is it the first time it's being used? This tool of exploratory consultation?
No, I think we have been consulting in general,
Yes,
stakeholders very often on many of our initiatives. I think the idea that it is called explanatory consultation is very much to be open and hear everybody's views. So I would, the way I see it, and you also hear it from the introductory remarks on both sides, there are very different views on in particular the issue of contribution, but this explanatory consultation is also much broader, because sometimes we are jumping into this specific issue, which is of course very interesting, important, and something that for sure we would like to explore with all stakeholders, but the consultation is much broader. Consultation looks very much into the future of the networks, the future of the connectivity in general, what would be needed for the future needs. So we are really trying to look very much forward, like what our Commissioner Breton said already in Barcelona. He really sees it as a networks for the future use, basically. We are talking about Web 4, we are talking about virtual worlds. There will be so much of the future use cases that we are trying to see how to adjust to this, what needs to be done. So we are a little bit trying to go away from traditional understanding of the electronic communication sector. We also see through our work that indeed we see the shift from the copper traditional networks, of course, to fiber and 5G. So we are trying to find answers to much broader questions, including also, for example, important questions on spectrum, which we have not touched for, and it's rarely mentioned in the context of this consultation, or also questions regarding the future regulatory framework in general. So I think what is important to say, it's much broader than fair contribution debate, but it's very much open. We are waiting for the answers. We are happy to be in different fora, like today, to listen to the views. But also, we don't see this as a battle of two worlds. We really see it as we need to get there. We have the targets on connectivity. We need to.
But what about this exploratory part? Because I understand, because I had a look and I read the Better Regulation Toolbox, and it says that these consultations are preliminary in nature, and they do not waive formal consultation requirements. So my next question is, if there were any problems to be identified at the end of this consultation, will there be another consultation that goes with
I think we have to see what would be the outcome of this consultation in first place. So, as you said, it is a consultation that we are kicking off the discussion with. So we'll have to see what will be the outcome. We have to analyze the answers, and we have to see basically what would be the potential proposals, if any, coming from this consultation. And then, depending on that, we will see if the additional consultations are needed. I have to also admit that my colleagues are already discussing in different forums, so it is very broad consultation already.
And giving the timing of the consultation also, is it something for this commission, or could it be something for the next term?
I think what is important to see is what would be needed and in which time frame. We already see that for 2030 targets that we established in Digital Decade, as you mentioned, there is already, with our estimates, considerable gap, investment gap of 178 billion, if I remember correctly. And we need to see how to fill in this gap, how to help with either regulatory solutions or pro-investment solutions. But what we are often forgetting, we are already doing a lot. So we already proposed in February this year quite considerable connectivity package apart from the consultation, so where we focus on very important issue like access to DAX, civil engineering with the Gigabit Infrastructure Act. And we also open a little bit discussion on the way the telecom markets are regulated currently, what kind of remedies regulators are using with the discussion on draft access recommendations. So there is a lot of things ongoing. We are trying to ensure that we achieve the targets of 2030, but we are also preparing, and this Commission is very prudent into looking very much into future for the next wave as well. It would be, of course, decision of the college if we propose something under this mandate, but I would not exclude it.
I promise we'll come back to the other leverage we can act upon, but I'm back to this fair contribution mechanism. And I'm sorry, and it must be very frustrating for journalists like me always getting back to this very issue. Thomas, I understand many organizations, just like Epicenter Works, have been quite critical of the consultation in itself. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the reasons why this whole debate has been so heated is in a way because it's so old. We had a discussion in 2012 at ITU level about sending party pays, which is in essence at the core of what ETNO is proposing that the Commission has picked up on. And it is a very dangerous idea for the Internet for many reasons. And since that Reuters article after the speech of Margarete Vestager, we have seen a string of stakeholders sounding the alarm bell about these proposals. We have the regulators saying, oh, please don't regulate that market. It would be dangerous for the internet ecosystem. We have the MVNO saying this would be really bad for competition in the telecom market. We have the media regulators that say this would be bad for media pluralism. We have the gaming industry that says this is bad for gaming. We have the internet exchanges that warn this could really be detrimental for the resilience of the open internet. And the consumer protection organizations that are very clear that this might lead to higher costs for the end user at the end. And for us as civil society, net neutrality is the main thing that we are worried about. And here again, we are not alone. And it is quite baffling to see how net neutrality, for example, is missing in the consultation from the Commission. Similarly to many of the other harms that have been identified that can be found in many of the open letters that have been issued since May of last year. And all while there is a lot of uncertainty around the process, as you've just asked the Commission, it's very hard to get answers about will there be a proper public consultation? Will there be an impact assessment? And lastly, we've now seen the unprecedented step of outsourcing the analysis of the exploratory consultation to a third party. It would be also very interesting to know who is this third party who will get all of the confidential responses from all of the stakeholders about the interconnection market. I mean, I'm all for transparency, but it would be good to know. And I mean, it tells you something when 7 member states, including Germany, have to send a letter to the Commission reminding it of its own due diligence principles.
Do you maybe want to reply to Thomas about this lack of transparency?
Yeah, very briefly, first of all, I'm surprised that you are talking about proposals of the Commission because, well, it's consultation and we ask questions. So it's, but it's a bit strange of way of putting things because by definition, these are not proposals. This is open consultation with open questions. So there is no proposal in these questions. Second thing, we are, of course, looking into the very broad evidence. We are also looking into analyzing what is already happening. We are also looking in different markets, what is, for example, happening in South Korea, where indeed the paying principle pays has been applied for the first time. So we are gathering a lot of interesting evidence. As for the use of the potential study, this is normal practice in the Commission. Very often we have the consultations wrapped up by the potential contractor studies, and this is also explicitly mentioned that it can be done by external contractor with all due respect for the confidentiality of the responses. It's also the immense number of the responses that we get that requires a little bit of additional help. Still, this would be for the wrapping up and making sure that we have all the data possible, but the summary report, everything will be prepared by the Commission, and any decisions that will be taken by the Commission. So that I don't really buy this issue. On net neutrality rules, I think...
We'll get to that in a minute.
I leave it because
Sorry,
that was
we're on a
already
very
mentioned.
tight
I was
schedule, so I'm trying
replying to everything.
No, thank you. I was going to say that there is no proposal, but the consultation sketches a few potential solutions anyway. One of them being this direct payment mechanism that would target some very large traffic generators. Lisa, why do you think that's fair? Why do you think that's a way forward? And I say fair on purpose because that's obviously one of the sensitive wording that's being used about it.
Okay, I talked previously about the investment gap and the fact that we cannot really manage data growth, which is not in all ways beneficial to our clients. I would like to give two figures in that respect, and that goes to the fair share mechanism. Do you know how much bandwidth does TikTok takes up on big telecom networks compared to Apple FaceTime?
You're going to tell us?
1,042. That means that TikTok and our network represents 1,042 times the size of Apple FaceTime, so a normal video call on Apple, which is quite utilized. Another figure, do you know how much bandwidth does TikTok takes in comparison to Microsoft Teams?
You're making me feel like I haven't done my homework. Should I know the figures by heart?
117. What I suggest is that there is, in some ways, overutilization of network. This is not due to consumers, this is due also to the way you encode videos. And there are many ways to optimize that. So what we need is a price signal, because bandwidth is a precious resource. Spectrum is a scarce resource. And if we have to have radio stations all around Europe, it's better not to double the number of antennas of radio station every 5 years, because that won't be acceptable to the population. So we have a shared responsibility, content providers and also telecom operators, to look at all the ways to optimize bandwidth. When water is free and when water is paid by someone else, why would you care about consuming a lot of water? We need a price signal, and maybe we need also to explore all avenues to optimize the use of bandwidth. And I'm sure we can have many avenues which are perfectly compliant with net neutrality. But I'm sure we will come to back.
In a minute, but maybe I'd like to hear from Guido. Is data the same as water?
Data is not the same as water, but I think that's not the point. The point is that...
No, but are you driving the demand? Are you being sufficiently data efficient? I guess that's also what's in the air.
It's consumers who drive demand. It's in the interest of content application providers to make sure that consumers have a seamless experience. So it's also in the interest of CAPs to optimize data and data traffic. And so there is actually a lot of investment that comes from CAPs into, for example, content delivery networks, which make sure that the content is as close to the final user as possible. And we're talking about 800 billion euros investment in the past 10 years, 330 of which in the past 3 years. So this is not negligible. And again, it's they're not free riders in this situation. I mean, on the other hand, there is also, we need to point to the fact that content network operators are being paid for the service by their end users already, and this seems to be like a second payment that they're seeking from those who provide the content, which, by the way, also drives the business model of the telecom operators.
What do you make of that argument? Because this is something we've been hearing a lot from the content providers, that it would amount to making the customers pay twice, actually, for the same service.
First, I would like to say a little bit about investment. Yeah. My figures are drawn from Analysis Mason. This is an Analysis Mason report, which was actually commissioned by some of the members of your association. And what does report says? It says that the investment of the content providers is 55 times less than the investment of telcos. So this is an important figure to show the difference in terms of magnitude of investment. And we don't benefit at all from data growth. On the contrary, the revenue per gigabyte in Europe has been divided by 10 over the last 10 years. So we don't benefit from data growth. And what clients want, they want connectivity. They don't benefit at all from the fact that TikTok takes up 1,000 more time, more bandwidth than Apple, FaceTime. They don't benefit for it. Why is there so much utilization and supply-driven data growth? Because they want to attract attention. They want to attract more clicks because they want to attract more ad revenues. But we are not a tool just to socialize cost and privatize revenues from the others. So we should have a better deal, and we should really look at the ways to optimize network utilization, because at the end of the day, we will have to solve this investment gap. And it's better to do that together and to explore those avenues together.
So one of these avenues, as you just said, is this network fees. And I'd like to come back to the net neutrality side of things, because I understand this is also one of the big concerns for a large part of the digital players here. So Camilla, I know the Commission said before repeatedly that it would infringe net neutrality rules at all, but maybe can you tell us why? Can you maybe elaborate, because the concerns are still here?
Mm-hmm. I understand that concerns are still here, that I also hear, but I think we were absolutely clear that we don't think that open internet rules would be infringed in any way.
You don't think, or you know for sure? Because that's also the thing. Okay.
We know for sure. And we are also strongly committed to this rule. So I would also like to ensure everyone that the Commission is now, for example, assessing and will publish very soon the report, which would be basically showing the last 4 years of the applicability of the open internet rules. So we are absolutely sure that we are committed to these rules. We are sure that these rules should not be used in, for example, the way by the telecom operators that might throttle or block the content, especially as a retaliation mechanism. We also don't really see it. For example, Deutsche Telekom dispute is about something completely else. So I think we need to a little bit think. We have very good neutrality rules. The current dispute, the current discussion is on fair contribution. We don't think that this discussion would influence or any solutions that may come the net neutrality rules, which will stay, and we are very much committed to them, as we expressed several times.
I see skepticism on Thomas's face.
Yes. So to maybe settle this debate, why is net neutrality, of course, infringed by this proposal from ETNO that the Commission is currently consulting in the form of questions 54 and 60 in the exploratory consultation. If you make the functioning of the internet cable dependent on the price that's paid on either end, of course you lose the internet as we have it today. Right now, the open internet regulation of the EU gives every end user the right to freely access and provide services, irrespective from where they are and from which company they are. I have the whole internet at my disposal. And that's, by the way, why, of course, it's also in the interest of telcos that there is traffic growth, because people are actually not buying to be in the network of Deutsche Telekom or Orange. They are buying to access the internet, all of it, with good quality. That's what we call best effort. That's another principle in the open internet regulation that will be infringed here. Because, of course, the quality will suffer for those that don't pay enough to the telco or to the fund, no matter which option you choose. And we already see this in interconnection disputes. We've seen it in the pandemic when e-learning providers were throttled because their links were saturated and students could not do homeschooling in the pandemic because Deutsche Telekom was only providing good service for those that pay. And that's exactly the type of paid fast lane that we tried to outlaw with net neutrality. And our open internet regulation also applies to this area that we call interconnection, where networks connect with each other. BEREC says that in its guidelines about net neutrality. So this is essentially a net neutrality issue. We cannot make a distinction here without infringing on the core principles. And in that light, we have to quote a discussion that POLITICO leaked in the German Digital Ministry, where the regulator said it's a no-brainer. Of course, this will infringe net neutrality. So it's only two actors that are denying this, and this is the telecom industry and the European Commission.
You like to differ, I believe. Please make it short, because there are like some other topics we need to address.
I differ completely in two ways. The first thing is net neutrality is one-sided. We are very proud, we telcos, to apply net neutrality because it enables every user to access the choice of the content it chooses, and because it's also a free internet for SMEs, for example. So we are proud to apply net neutrality, but why is it only 180 degrees? Why isn't it 360 degrees? Why is there not any non-discrimination principle on the content provider side? Why is there not a non-discrimination principle on search engines, on app stores, on content providers?
So would you like to reopen?
Net neutrality should be 360. Why I hear is that we have threats from certain who are opposed to the fair share principle, who say that they will degrade their interconnection capacity on the telcos, and they will discriminate the telcos who want a fair share. This is the real issue. This is not a fair share issue. Another part of the story is that net neutrality, there is a litmus test to know whether we are compliant or not with net neutrality. The first litmus test is agnosticism toward the content. Either fair share, content agnostic, yes. That would be based, in our view, in the overutilization of traffic. This would be linked with the way you use or not bandwidth. The other litmus test is, do we block or throttle content? We do not want to throttle content because our customers will be strongly dissatisfied. And anyway, net neutrality is a side story. There has no relationship ever with the fair share principle.
I believe there is a lot more that we could say, but I'm sorry, we need to move on to the next topic, because there is one country which introduced such a mechanism already. It's South Korea, as you're probably very well aware. But reports have shown that it has led to some content and application providers to actually withdraw from the market, to deterioration of the quality of services, more latency, and also an increase to the cost for the customers. What lessons, if any, should we draw from the South Korean example? Guido, yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, as a global association, we've also been very involved in the discussion in Korea that has enacted already a Underpace framework, which so far currently applies only between ISPs, but they're also discussing legislation currently in the Korean National Assembly to introduce a network-based system that would force content application providers to pay for sending their data through the networks. And we are seeing all the potential criticalities that we've been highlighting in the discussion in Europe about the fact that essentially this leads ISPs in a position to control what kind of data is sent around. Also, there has been a recent interesting report from the European Parliament's Research Service that has outlined how, in reality, those measures have not improved investment in networks in Korea. Actually, they've deteriorated it, and that consumer choice has suffered, competition has suffered. So it's really all the different problems that we see with a potential system based on a network fee. The debate is still open in Korea, but again, based on what we see from the Underpace network measures that we have currently enacted already, there are very serious problems with the system.
Kamala, in the Commission, will you pay attention? Will you learn lessons from the South Korean precedent?
First of all, we are, of course, looking into it because it's, as we said, precedent. I also think it's a bit too early to conclude about this precedence, to be absolutely honest. It's just at the beginning of the introduction of the rules. There is not enough evidence to to fully conclude how it works. But yes, of course, we are looking for this kind of examples. There are not so many indeed, and South Korea is one of the precedences, and we will continue observing it.
But I read that last Tuesday, Netflix announced that it would invest $2.5 billion within the forthcoming years. So that shows that investment is not downward in South Korea, despite the SPNP principle. And I've also seen that the broadband prices are in a downward trend. So I don't see any blatant evidence that this really did harm to the South
Prices
Korean
are going
economy.
up in Korea.
Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, just to give a little bit of context, I mean, South Korea has probably the best fiber-to-the-home network in the world, yet the quality is deteriorating in the country because all of the content providers are fleeing because it's suddenly so expensive to host there that they all move to Japan.
I quoted my sources, you didn't quote yours.
No, I can look at our materials. The OECD even has reports about that, that South Korea is now really drastically deteriorating in the quality, although they have almost a brilliant, perfect network. And the reason why that is suddenly the way you structure the network, where you have the content, where you hand it over into network, that's no longer optimized for the user's benefits. It's optimized for the monetary interests of the telcos. And for Europe, that would probably mean a Brexit windfall dividend. Because where would the content go? To London, to the internet exchange there. Because Ofcom, the UK regulator, has looked at the European debate and concluded bluntly, this is a really stupid idea. Of course, we're not going to do that.
Could that happen, what Thomas just described?
I think we are discussing a little bit hypothetical scenarios, to be absolutely honest. I think we are, as I said, we have to look into evidence. No decisions are taken yet, and it is really hypothetical discussions currently if that would happen or not, depending on the proposals that will be made.
Will there be an impact assessment before any potential further legislation?
We'll see. I think we are very much bound by evidence-based approach, so we would like to make sure that everything is properly analyzed.
So you cannot promise an impact assessment?
I didn't say that.
Well, I can leave you to it if you want my spot. But we'll have to when we have like still 10 minutes left to go, and I've got still so many questions actually. But Lisa, I've got one just for you, because the consultation also asked about the possibility for an EU-wide fund to bridge that gap. Some European telcos have said before they're strongly against it and would rather have this direct mechanism. Where do you stand?
We actually support direct settlement between the content providers and telecom operators with strong guidelines from the European Commission based on the calculation of an efficient operator. And this is mainly private investment, so I'm not sure a universal fund system would work just like it is contemplated in the US, because we have already wide coverage in terms of connectivity. The issue is data growth and capacity, which is supply-driven. So we would better like a fund, not a fund, but flagged investment, to be sure that if we obtain compensation from the firm, this will be flagged to investment which is necessary for clients. And we also suggest many ways of optimizing bandwidth. For example, there are already good examples, but they're not the general rule. For example, in terms of software, if we put a data saving mode by default, that would be really beneficial for all. We can also have some Wi-Fi download only at home to better optimize the interplay between Wi-Fi, for example, and 5G or 4G.
But I understand these kind of options are left to the customers
No,
today, right?
they have to click 4-6 times, so we need seamless access.
Do we need the platforms to enforce better practices?
We want to empower consumers to make them conscious that there are sober options and less sober options, because this is a shared responsibility. We would also like to have a debate about optimization of codecs. The French regulator has surveyed the codecs, and they said that only 1/3 of video streams use the most efficient codecs. So maybe they are open source, there are some non-objection clauses that could be lifted. Maybe we could also license them at friend conditions, because that would be for the general welfare. So there are a string of reflections that we will offer in our answer to the public consultation, and which we would like to be examined. A price signal with a fair share, but also other avenues to optimize bandwidth for the benefit of all, and to be sure that we utilize the network in a responsible way in terms of CO2 emissions, in terms of use of spectrum, because spectrum is not infinite.
Are content providers doing enough?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to comment on this, because I think that is really a discussion that is worth having. I mean, and I think we see that content providers are really doing a lot in terms of investing in innovations. Video compression, you mentioned codecs, but also the bitrate screen ratio, where you send different types of or lower amounts of data to a video that is projected on a phone screen rather than on a big TV screen at home, or adapting transmission to the network capacity. These are all things that content providers are doing and will continue doing, and that's probably where it is really worth discussing how can we improve that. As I mentioned, CDNs, which is I think a major element in the way that you manage the data and the traffic. I think what you call a price signal and a fair share, which essentially means money coming from platforms and going to telecom operators, we do not really see how that could be a viable option to address this discussion, for all the reasons that we mentioned. Again, it would reduce access. It would have, I think, serious consequences for both the open internet, because right now, open internet means you can put something on the web and it goes everywhere in the world. It would not happen with a network fee, where you would have to negotiate with every telecom operator for your content to reach the final users. There will be serious issues with internet fragmentation, because again, you would have different types of content distributed in different regions in the world, depending on how the system might potentially evolve worldwide. Because we're talking about Korea, we may be talking about the European Union. If every region in the world enacts this system, it would be very, very difficult for content providers to distribute their content worldwide.
Would you be more open to this EU-wide fund?
I don't think that that is not an issue. The issue is the principle that content providers need to pay for having their content reaching the final user.
So the debate has been often framed as this fight between big tech and big telcos, and some journalists are responsible for it too. But all this conversation we're having, Thomas, I would like to ask, how will it impact the consumers, the customers at the end of the day? Because this is what we're talking about. What will be the impact on them?
Most likely, if we follow the South Korean example, we will see poorer internet quality. We'll see higher prices, both for Netflix subscriptions or any other type where the customer is paying. We most likely will also see an increase in the costs of public administration and public broadcasters, because they make up a lot of traffic in every member state country. And so they probably also will have to pay and concur that cost. And it doesn't matter whether they operate their own network or host with Google or Amazon. So that cost will certainly trickle down. It's basically a redistribution of wealth from all parts of society towards the telecom industry. And we see that the incentives that will be created are really detrimental for the stability of the internet. Because right now, technicians in a decentralized internet optimize for the quality of the end user. That will change. There will be less incentive to have caching service within the network of the operator where the customers are, close to the capitals of the cities where the users live. They will have an incentive to have the data flow from outside towards the network, because that's where the money will come in. And that will be a drastic shift from the way the internet works. Actually, it was one of the founding principles that we decouple connectivity from content. Here we intertwine this two again, and the real core of the proposal, to put that in perspective, is the old business model from the telephony era. It's termination monopoly. It is a price regulation. You want to reach my customers, here's the price table. And who wants to go back to the telephony era when it comes to the internet? So ultimately, I think it's a lose-lose for everybody, with just one particular industry who stands to gain. And we also have other industries that will be bystanders and will be quite happy with that. This whole thing calls itself fair. What about e-commerce and search? They make up a tiny, tiny fraction of the traffic in the internet, but have huge profits. So they will be incentivized with this. I think the only fair model on the table is a revenue-based model.
Okay, we're getting very close to the end of our panel. I would like to ask you, Camilla, as I said earlier, there are many other leverage that the consultation is looking at. So maybe can you walk us through them? You talked before about spectrum also. Thierry Breton has repeatedly said that all options were on the table. I guess also when it comes to market consolidation, on market telecom consolidation. So are all options on the table here?
I think in the consultation, we'll ask several different issues. So as I said, we are focusing on one here, which is of course very interesting, but it's not the only one. On the on the spectrum, we are very much looking in what was already achieved by harmonization of spectrum under the provisions of the electronic communications framework, where we see significant progress. Also the fact that we had clear deadlines for the main bands is also very important from the perspective of deployment of 5G. But what we are looking into is if it's sufficient, if it's enough. Because what we see, indeed, one of the obstacles, in particular for 5G, is the fact that the market, in terms of spectrum allocation, is fragmented. We see different developments in different member states. There are also delays that are a little bit holding us back. So this is very much open consultation, looking also into security issues, making sure that also looking into the satellites, which is extremely important topic, how this licensing should be done. So that's one of the important topics. The second topic, which is also very relevant for the discussions as well that we are having now, is in general the way we regulate the markets, the traditional telecom markets. You mentioned that the traditional termination monopoly coming back through the back door in the context of the fair contribution and the content. We also have to look into the way we are currently regulating markets. The era of copper is slowly but surely over. So we also have to recognize this. We see on the different markets in different member states that infrastructure competition is developing. We see with the advancement of fiber that sometimes we are not talking about old incumbents. We are very much often talking with regulators now about potential local monopolies or potential full deregulation of some of the markets or even national markets. So this is one of many issues that we would like to discuss. And also what is very important, we would like to focus on the, as I said, connectivity for the future and the future needs in terms of different use cases and what we broadly discuss as Web 4.0.
Thank you. I've got one last question for each and every one of you, and I will ask you to have a very, very short answer. What will be the key ingredient to successful, sustainable connectivity across the block in the coming years? Who would you like to start? Everyone is racking their brains over the questions. Lisa, please.
Yeah, two ingredients: solving the investment gap and see that as a shared responsibility. And another factor is also tax issues, which are very different across the country. For example, in France, we have 14.4% of impôt de production. That means taxes which have to pay without cashing any revenue. And this is 14.4% of our EBE, excédent brut d'exploitation. It's a little bit before EBITDA. Whereas in the EU, it's only 6.2%. So this is a real issue we have also to tackle to solve the investment gap.
Okay, thank you. Thomas?
I actually agree on the taxes thing. I think that is a real problem, but I don't think it is necessary for the connectivity problem. I agree on the second point, but not on the first. for me, the only thing that can really help us with providing connectivity to all is competition in the telecom market. This used to be a success recipe of the EU. We kind of forgotten that, and that worries me. What I just heard reminds me of structural separation. I hope that could be an element of a solution there. And ultimately, it has to be said, keeping net neutrality and the open internet alive, because what is the internet for if we can't use it freely and openly?
Thank you. Camilla?
For me, two things I would mention. One, indeed, is investment challenge. But here, I think we see, first of all, the amount of investment gap, but we also have clear targets for 2030, and I think we also have very good now coordination mechanisms to make sure that we are getting there across the EU. But second, or even as much important, is indeed keeping the single market and basically making sure that there is less fragmentation across the
Okay.
market.
Thank you. Guido?
Maybe building back on that, also ensuring that there is no internet fragmentation, and we keep an internet that is open, that is accessible for all sides, and also I think the importance of competition really to drive investment, which is I think it's doesn't need to be explained or demonstrated, I think being clear that not all the investment needs are related to growth in traffic data.
Thanks a lot for your time and your insight and for this lively and interesting conversation. I feel like we'll have many other opportunities to discuss these issues in coming weeks or months, if not years. Thank you all for joining us today and for taking part in this panel, although I didn't get many questions, which I found surprising. But we can keep the discussions off stage. We will now have a break, so go stretch your legs, have a drink, but don't go too far because you should be back at 4 for the next panel on green and cost-effective tech. Thank you very much.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.